Welcome to another video, guys. So today I wanted to talk about one of my favorite live stream encoders. It's called the Link Pi. The Link Pi comes in several different iterations. I actually have 3 of these Link Pi boxes. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about this, and I did want to configure one as well. So this video is essentially going to be me giving you a little bit of information about this Link Pi encoder, and then going ahead and configuring one of these encoders as well. So just to talk a little bit about the Link Pi encoder, essentially it is an encoder and a decoder used specifically for live streaming and recording as well. The source code is open source, so you've got that open source option over there, and that's a little bit of picture of the board that exists in the Link Pis, in some of them at least. Now, there are several different iterations of the Link Pi encoders, right? You've got the smallest one, which is called the Link Pi Tiny Encoder, and that comes at a price of 118 Australian dollars, which is a very, very reasonable price. So it's something probably about 85 to 90 US dollars, right? So that's a really, really good price for that encoder, right? So you've got that one, and then you've also got the other one that I have is this one right here, which is the ENC1 version 3. This is a 4K HDMI encoder decoder, priced at 194 Australian dollars. That's also an excellent price for something as capable as this device. And if you actually have a look at the device, this does do 4K, and it does 4K 30, and then you can do 1080p 30 or 60 frames. It does NDI, HX, SRT, RTMP, RTSP live streaming. So those are and of course like your RTSP, which is your IP camera, right? So that's essentially what it does. The rear panel, so in the front panel, you can actually plug in a USB eSATA drive for recording. You've got an OLED screen that gives you the IP address, the HDMI in and out situation, and the CPU. You've got a menu button, but I don't really use this. I usually it's got a web server, so you can actually connect to it over the web once you plug it into your network, and that's kind of how I access it. Now, on the rear panel, let's go start from the right to the left, right? So in the beginning, on the right side, you've got the DC 12 volts. So it does take a 12 volt DC barrel jack, but it can be powered. If you wanted to power this on the go, if you want to use it for IRL streaming, you can actually power it with a power bank as well, just using a step-up cable or a step-down cable, depending on the side you look. But yeah, it definitely can be powered by a power bank, right? So this doesn't need a wall outlet all the time. Just an FYI there. So you've got a LAN port next to that. That's obviously for your internet. It does do NDI HX as well. So you can actually do NDI with this encoder, and you've got a LAN port obviously for that. You've got 2 USB ports. So one of them can be used for webcam, and the other one is for a USB drive. So you can actually record directly to that drive as well. So that's extremely handy to actually have. You've got HDMI in and HDMI out, so you can actually have a video switcher go into the HDMI in, and then your output is like essentially just a copy of that feed that you can actually monitor as well. You can connect to a monitoring screen, or you can send it further if you want it. So that's the HDMI out for. What I really like about it is it's actually got audio in and out. This is line level audio in and out. So you can actually have like a separate audio feed going in, like maybe a microphone if you wanted to, but then you got the output of that as well that can actually go into something else like an audio mixer for like local audio if you wanted to. So there are several options. It's a little bit like a Swiss Army knife. You've got a lot of different options for it. And of course, right at the end, you've got a reset button that can reset the entire software that's built into the Link Pi to factory settings. So that's really the Link Pi's rear panel in a nutshell. All right, so what I'm going to do now, I do have 2 Link Pis that I've actually web browsed to. I'm actually going to log out of here. So this is my older one. So I've got 2 Link Pis. This is my older one called the ENC1 version 2. correct? And then you've got this other one that I've got, which is the newer one, which is the version 3, which is the 4K version. So at the moment, I'm actually using the Link Pi version 2. I'm still on that. I haven't actually configured my Link Pi version 3. So that's exactly what I'm going to do today. All right, so actually let's get started with that. All right, so what I'm going to do, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to log into my Link Pi version 2. And I've logged into my Link Pi version 2. Now, as you can see, this is the front interface of the Link Pi. It does give you a fair bit of information, which is very, very handy to know the status of your Link Pi. So at the moment, it's sitting at about 17% CPU usage. I've got one source into it at the moment. So I've got the HDMI. I've just basically got a computer that's outputting HDMI signal into the Link Pi. So it's connected over the HDMI input. And that's really all that there is at the moment. And it's sitting at about 40% memory usage. Core temperature about 45%, 45 degrees centigrade. And you can see a little bit of network activity over there, which is great. That's fine. It's just giving us connectivity sort of activity over there. Now, what I'm going to do is, the preview, you can actually stop the preview over here. And if I give it a bit of a refresh, you can see that the CPU went down a little bit by 1%, right? So, there are a few things that you can do to actually decrease the CPU usage, but I kind of like to see the preview, frankly, right? So I'm going to just have a look at that preview over there. Now, let's just go through these tabs real quick before I actually start configuring my other Link Pi. And I'm going to use this one as a template just to configure my other Link Pi, right? So let's actually get into the encode section. Now, like I said, this Link Pi device is an encoder and a decoder, right? So essentially right now, we are on the encode section. And as you can see, this is an overall config. So you can actually set this up and then you can say save to local or save to group and it'll automatically populate the same settings across the board. That is great. And that is handy for certain things, but in this case, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go through all the sort of inputs that you can use, and then we will actually have a look at how to configure this when we configure the new one. So just to dive a bit deeper into this, you've got a HDMI input, you've got USB camera, you've got a network input, and you've got a mix, right? So you've got a few of these. Now I'll actually talk a little bit about them as we move forward. So this is quite a complicated piece of software. I'm not going to lie. It took me a while to figure this out, right? So it could take some time, but look, just like anything else, things do take time and eventually you will figure it out because it's an excellent piece of kit, right? So let's just talk a little bit more. So you've got a HDMI input. Now you've got a few different options to configure it. You can actually have it on auto. So it'll basically, it will, whatever source that you do feed it, it will actually give it that video size, but I like to set it at 1080p. And I use the codec I use is H.264 high profile. You can actually use a few others. It does have H.265 encoding as well. But since I'm streaming H.264, I'm going to leave it at H.264 high profile, right? And then you've got a substream. So these are quite handy. So you can actually have two different types of encoding for two different types of streams. I've never used a substream before, but it's just available. And if you really need to use a substream, it is available, right? So that's actually, substreams are usually like a lower bitrate, lower latency stream that if you do need to stream, if your main stream gets cut out, it will pick up the substream, right? So that's really what it is for. The rate control that I use is CBR, which is constant bit rate. But if I drop that down, you can actually see the other options over here. You've got constant bit rate, variable bit rate, adaptive variable bit rate, which is better than variable bit rate. It will adapt based on your internet or your network. And fix a QP. I've never used that before. I don't know what it is, but I would love to find out. So if you do know what it is, please comment. Please comment there in the comment section under the video. And if you can tell me what the fixed QP is, that would be really helpful. Great. So that's the rate control. Now you can actually set the bit rate for these devices as well. Look, usually I stream to like, platforms such as Kick and Twitch. So I set it to 6,000 and I've got 60 frames over there. I could actually decrease that to 30 frames, frankly, but I think 60 frames have worked well for me in the past, so that's what I set it to. I think the GOP seconds is really your frames. I think it's like the two frame buffer, that this very similar setting to you have in OBS, right? So that's kind of what it is. It's been set to 2 and 1 over there. I'm not changing that. That's just the way it is. And this actually enables that that actual HDMI. So if I disable it and save, you'll have a look. I go to my dashboard, you'll see that I don't actually have anything in here, right? It has dropped my CPU a little bit, but I'm gonna go back here and I'm gonna go ahead and enable that, and I'm gonna save it. And when I do, I go back to my dashboard, and there we go. We've got our HDMI input source that's enabled. Right, so that's great. Now you do have a USB cam. Like I mentioned, you can plug in a USB camera into this device as well. And the same similar fashion, you can actually go ahead and set the encode settings for the USB cam. The network, net one is basically, you can actually have sources come across to it over the network. So you can actually have something come across to it over NDI, SRT, UDP, RTSP, really whatever you want to use. If you've got like a security camera somewhere sitting around that is basically RTSP, you can bring the feed into the box over RTSP, which is super handy. I'm probably going to end up doing that as well for this setup. Cool. So that's network and a mix. Now, what is mix? Mix is when the Link Pi has capability of actually mixing all these different sources into a mixer, which of course I will go through as well as we go along. But that's really what mix is. So you can actually individually set the resolution for all your input devices, and you can actually set the mix as well. So let's say you wanted to set mix, maybe the Link Pi is taking up too much CPU, you wanted to set it for lower resolution, you can actually do that as well, right? So that's really what the mix option is for. Great, so that's what the mix is for. We'll get into that. You've got some advanced encoding settings. Now you can actually set this to your smart encode. You've got a few of these. I've never used this before, but this is where you set your resolution. So your 1920 by 1080 is what it's set to, and you can actually set it to low latency as well. And when you do that, you're obviously that will decrease the latency of the video coming in and being encoded and being outputted as well. So low latency is an option, and when you do that, it will actually, it doesn't really affect your CPU, which is a good thing. So that's not a bad option to keep it as low latency there. Cool. So your advanced settings and low latency. Then you've got your video config. So this is your video input, which is the HDMI source. And if you connected USB, I think USB would show up as well. But right now you want full frame deinterlaced. You can actually set that. Usually I keep things as per default, and only if I have any issues is when I start changing things around, right? So at the moment, that's really it. This is essentially your video config. Is you can actually crop. So you can actually do a bit of cropping in here as well. You can rotate the video. You can do 90. You can do a 90-degree. Rotate it. So essentially, you can do vertical as well if you wanted to, right? With this thing, that would be super cool. So you can actually stream. You can actually have one encoder streaming to the likes of Instagram or TikTok as well. So yep, you can actually do 90 degrees. Your audio config. Look, I'm receiving audio over HDMI, so my codec I've selected is AAC. You do have a few options there. You have MP3, MPEG-2, or you can just close it for no audio at all. I like using AAC, which is higher quality. You can increasing the audio gain if you wanted to. So that's your obviously your gain over there. I like to leave it at 0 dB. Your sample rate, which is at the moment set to 44.1 kbps, and it is stereo. And your bit rate for the audio is 320 kbps, which is actually pretty good. I mean, I don't like to go higher than 320. You could actually even go 128 depending on the content that you're actually streaming, right? So, but at the moment, I think 320 is pretty good, right? So we'll talk about that. And then the last but not the least, of course, like I mentioned, you've got the network stream, right? So this is basically your SRT and your RTSP. That's what I've got over here. Now, as you can see in my SRT, I've set this. This is probably set to I am listener mode over here. It is listening on all IPs at port 5100. It's set to listener mode. So I can actually have maybe like, let's just say, let's talk about something simple. I could actually have a GoPro camera if you wanted that could stream directly to this device. Or you could actually have a remote OBS that streams directly to this device as well. So you've got SRT and RTSP essentially is for used a lot for security cameras, right? So you could actually have a security camera coming directly into here as well. So that's something that's really, really handy. So that's what the network stream is for. And you can select your protocol. You want UDP or TCP. I usually go with the UDP because I'm using SRT or RTSP, which is essentially UDP protocols, right? So right now, obviously, this has been disabled. But I have the audio and video encode enabled, right? So those are really the encoder settings. Now let's move on to stream. Now, there are a few ways to live stream from this device, okay? And it can get a little bit complicated. But I'm actually going to talk about this section, but I don't really use this section, correct? So just talking a little bit more about this section. Like I mentioned, you can stream from here, and there's another place where you can stream from as well. They're both a little bit different. This one has a bit more options, so I will talk about this. So really over here, right now, since I've got HDMI plugged in, I've got the option of streaming my HDMI, correct? So like I said, I can stream it via HTTP, HLS, RTMP, RTSP, and multicast. I can also do SRT as well. But in the stream config, in this section, the SRT option is not there, but you do have a separate section for SRT config, right? So let's just talk about this. So I can actually enable any of these. If I wanted to stream over RTMP, I could actually enable that, and then I need to enable push and then push URL. So this is the RTMP server that you're going to stream to, correct? So if I actually stream to this one right here, it will stream to the internal because this is streaming to my internal. So I'm just essentially streaming to itself, right? But I'm not going to do that right now, but that is an option, right? So for example, and I just want to show you how this works. I believe I know how to use it. Great. So essentially, now I just wanted to give you a quick demonstration of what I mean by it streams to itself, right? So the Link Pi encoder, as complicated as it actually is, it does have an internal player, right? And that can be found if you go to extend, and if you go to the H5 player, that's their internal player, right? So this is the Link Pi internal player where you can actually check and test your stream just to make sure that it's actually working. I'm sure there are other use cases for that, but that is the use case that I use it for. So I'm going to go back to stream. And how would I actually do that? So at the moment, as you can see in my dashboard, I do have the HDMI input coming through. I'll go back to stream. And what I'll do is I'll turn on RTMP and it'll turn on push, right? So essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to push this. It's going to push this over RTMP. So the HDMI feed is going to be pushed over RTMP to this RTMP address, right? So this is basically all it's saying is I'm pushing it to itself because 127.0.0.1 is essentially pushing it to itself, right? So once I do that and I hit save, it saved the configuration successfully. And then if I actually go to back to the H5 player, and now you can actually see that I'm getting the feed off my laptop or my computer right over here. And this is an actual live stream feed. So you can actually select, right now it's HDMI because that's the only one that's enabled on my stream section, right? That's the only one that there is. But if I had like another connection coming through, yeah, I would be able to enable that, and then I would have a few options there. So this is just an example of how to stream to itself. If you want to check something, if you want to test, that's what it's for, right? Now I'm going to actually turn this off and save. And now if I go back to my H5 player, there you go. I don't have any options there because I've turned off my stream options. Great. Okay, so moving along, we have the TS configuration. You can actually configure your TS. I've never done this before. I don't touch it. I've never need to use it, but of course, it's available for anyone who knows about TS. HLS as well. This is extremely handy. You can actually have a HLS stream going. This is something that I do want to dive deeper into because I know that now YouTube has HLS, correct? So you can actually, I can stream to YouTube over HLS. So this is extremely handy as well. The SRT configuration. So this is great because now I can actually set my encoder as a caller, listener, or do rendezvous. So all your regular SRT options are available right over here out of the box. So this is essentially for my mainstream and my substream. But I actually do stream SRT, and there's a different way to do it as well, which I will show you as we move forward. NDI configuration, like again, I can enable NDI over here, and if I enable that, then actually I can have things come in over NDI. So there you go now. If I go to encode, go back to stream, and I can actually, sorry, this is a stream section. So I'm over here now, I'm streaming over NDI, and my NDI name is stream 0. So if I actually open up a computer, and if I, let's say I've got a Windows computer with NDI tools installed on it, and sitting on the same local LAN as I am right now. And if I've got this enabled, essentially the video from this encoder is going to go to NDI tools. It's actually going to, you can view it on that computer because I've enabled NDI. So it's video across IP, right? So that's really what NDI is. So you can actually stream using this NDI, and so you can send NDI and you can receive NDI, right? So it is extremely handy for that. Now, push configuration, this is really something that I haven't played around with too much, but look, it has got a lot of options. Like I said, some things I do know about, some things I haven't used. So that's really it. And a play URL, you can probably, I haven't tried this, but you could possibly like maybe play back a URL stream with this as well. I haven't actually tried it though. So yeah, no idea. But this is really the stream section. Then you've got an overlay section. Now, like I mentioned, this has a mixer feature, correct? So you can actually go ahead and overlay things. So at the moment, like if I've got a USB camera plugged in, you'll be able to see that. And right now we're using HDMI and an overlay. So what you can do is you can actually go ahead and upload different sources, right? So like I've got these few images over here. So you can upload them, and then you can go ahead and add like a new effect, correct? And I can select like what I really want. So let's say I'm selecting image, add effect, and I can edit this image. And I can select the image. So look, I haven't done this in a while, but let's just see if it works. And save, and then I'll enable that, just save again. That really isn't doing much. Well, this is something that I do want to actually explore. Let me just see if I delete that. Let me see what happens. I go to new effect, image. And I select the image. And I save that. There we go. So that's really an overlay. So that's an image that I had, which was the untitled, my Merge Lab Live design that I had, that's now overlaid onto the video. So if you want to overlay something on your stream, that's extremely handy, correct? So this is the image that I selected. And now you can actually even change the position of the image, like just by doing that. Or let's say that I wanted to be all the way, well, that's a bit too far. Maybe somewhere here. There we go. So I could, so it's a little bit of a trial and error. It's not something like OBS where you can just use your mouse and move it, but it is quite helpful if you wanted to kind of change the position of it. And if you wanted to change the scale as well, so if I bring that kind of in the center, sort of there, right? And if I wanted to change the scale to something like that, yep, there we go. That's a lot larger. So it has scaled it. So there are a lot of options that you can do with overlays as well. I don't really use it very often, but it is there if you ever needed to use the overlay. Okay, so that's really it. That's overlays. Now the extend button. This is interesting. This is really where a lot of its functionality sits, right? So you've got your video mixer, correct? So this is essentially when you want to really mix different sources and create like a layout that you would do something like an OBS, correct? And that's really what this is for. So you've got your different input sources. So these are different layouts. You can actually, so you can configure the layouts as well. So if you hit this little cogwheel button, and here is where you can set up all your layouts, which is extremely helpful. So you have different kinds of layouts, and you can actually create your own. So you can actually go new, and you can actually go ahead and create a new layout. But let's just say that I decide that I want to use like, maybe a different layout. So I will actually be configuring a layout for this session, but for now I'm just going to leave it to what it was before. So I'm going to go back, I'm going to go to video mix, and this is really where you would actually select your layouts and set it up, and you can move things around as well, and everything is done from this little layout configuration section. So as you can see, I can move things around and snap it back into place, and so on and so forth, right? So this is a layout configuration, quite deep, but I will go through it when I'm setting something up. Great, okay. And then you've got your ROI, region of interest. So you can actually set up a specific region of interest for your encoder. So let's say you wanted to live stream and you wanted to only specifically live stream a certain area of your screen. You can actually do that using region of interest, right? NDI decode, like I mentioned before, it can send NDI and it can receive NDI. So at the moment, I'm not receiving anything, of course, but you can actually do that. So that's extremely handy. So you can receive an NDI feed locally or from a remote source, and you can actually receive that and then push it forward and further. So that's NDI. You've got a video carousel. Never used it before, but I think this could be like if you've got a number of videos, right, that you wanted to actually play back. So you can use this as a playback system, like a 24/7 playback system where, you could have one video playing after another, and you probably could have those on a USB drive. So if you have a USB drive, you can plug it in and then play back all those videos and then live stream it, right? So that's extremely handy. You can record. So you can record directly to a USB drive, like I mentioned. And these are the different recording formats that you can use. Extremely handy over there. Your intercom. So this is extremely handy. This is really when you've got multiple of these encoders, like just live streaming and in different places, right? You can actually have different people. This is really a comm situation, right? You can actually have this and you can have comms coming through. This is extremely handy. Never used it, but you can, right? You've got a few different modes as well for this, which is great. And you've got your serial. Not used this before. And you've got remote. Now, remote is essentially where you can actually have people remote into your device to help you out, correct? So that's extremely helpful. But the multiple push is one I wanted to talk about, right? So multiple push is what I actually use to push my sources to Twitch, because what you can do is whatever is actually coming in will display on the preview, right? And then you can actually go ahead and push and live stream these sources over RTMP, UDP, SRT, or whatever protocol you want to use. You can actually go ahead and do that with this, right? So this is really extremely handy and a way to multi-stream from your device, right? Great. Great. So these are really a brief overview of this Link Pi encoder, right? So now I'm going to go back to my dashboard. And as you can see, Right now it has the HDMI source, and that's really all this actually has at the moment, right? So let's actually go ahead and move to part 2 of this video. Just click on the next link. And in the part 2 of this video, I'll be talking about setting up my Link Pi version 3, because this is Link Pi version 2 that we went through, but Link Pi version 3, which is essentially the same software, but it just enables me to do 4K and a few other things. So what I'm actually going to do in the next part is make a copy of all the settings on my Link Pi version 2 onto my Link Pi version 3 and use that for my radio station instead of Link Pi version 1. All right. So guys, I'll see you in part 2 of the next video. Cheers.